Hey everybody, it is time once again for another Rahdo Q&A. And hello everybody, I'm about to answer a bunch of questions submitted by folks like you to the email address questions@rahdo.com. And by all means folks, if anything I talk about or my wife talks about, because she sometimes shows up on these as well, prompts any further questions from you, well, you know what to do. Questions@rahdo.com is the email address. Keep them coming, folks. I want to hear your cues so I can am. And speaking of which, let's get right to it. But, folks, I'm going to talk about several different topics today, and if any of them don't really strike your fancy, don't worry. There are links down in the show notes that let you jump around from question to question so you can listen to just the parts you're interested in. All right, sound good? Then let's go. All righty, here we go. We are starting out with Dan, who says, I listened to a recent Q&A where you talked about how some people complain, boycott even, videos on your channels that are done by one of your collaborators rather than you. I'm not one of those people. I think you have great collaborators. But I found that my board game tastes align more closely with you and Kimberly than anyone else. I've watched plenty of Shay videos, and I'm more inclined to skip one when I see it's from Shay or Amy and Maggie than if it's you running through it. I've definitely been burned by this, though. For instance, when I saw Amy and Maggie ran through Plants of Nubo, my first thought was, I'm surprised Rahdo passed on a Rosenberg game with a solar punk theme, but he didn't even want to play it, so then I'm probably not going to like it. It wasn't until later that I saw that you were interested and found the time to go back and watch their wonderful run-through. How would you feel about making your internal bids on what to cover public? Even if it's just for Patreon backers, it'd be really great screening data point to help viewers like me decide what to watch. Thank you so much for your and your whole team's great work. Well, I kind of already do that, Dan, in a couple of ways. First of all, if you're a Patreon, thank you very much. When I post the run-throughs from everybody to Patreon, I actually describe what the video is, right? I say, well, okay, with this one we got Ruel looking at this game or that game or blah, blah, blah. And when I'm writing those up, and these are messages only Patreon backers see, although actually that's not true. Anybody can go to patreon.com/Rahdo and see these descriptions. You can even subscribe to my feed on patreon.com. You don't have to pay a penny, and you'll get notice of every single thing that goes on in Rahdo land. You just won't get access to the paid exclusive stuff. But anyway, in those, I do try to point out that, oh yeah, I mean, this is a game I definitely wanted to play, but I didn't have a copy of it and Shay did. Like you mentioned Plants of Nubo. It kills me that I'm probably not going to get to play that game until maybe April of next year, if I'm lucky. Amy and Maggie had a copy of it from, going to Essen Spiel, and I wanted to see the game as much as anybody else, so I said, hey, could you do a run-through? And like I said, they did a fantastic run-through. Shay, back-to-back, his last two run-throughs on the channel were for Kutnahora and Evacuation, two heavy, crunchy Euro games that have every opportunity to make it into my personal top 10 of the year. It's just, again, I didn't have a chance to film them because we were hitting the road, so I could be where I am right now in this RV. And I did want to get them on the channel, so I literally I mailed my copies down to LA so that he could cover them. Hey, wait a minute, Jen is not here yet. I need to turn off the Jen. Say goodbye to the little picture of Jen right there, folks. She will show up later in the personal Q&A section where we talk about all of our misadventures on the road. All right, anyway, sorry. So, and maybe I don't do as good a job as I should. I will definitely take this on board and redouble my efforts to point out when I post these to Patreon and I'm describing, hey, what's this video, so you know whether you want to watch it or not. And by the way, this is a game that I am personally very keen on playing. Because you're right. Shay also covers Ameritrashy style games, like he recently covered Nemesis as well. And I don't care about that at all. And so I totally get why, I think that's what I'm going to do. It sounds like what you're asking for is what I'm already doing. I just probably need to redouble my efforts to make it super clear that, if you might have dismissed this because I didn't cover it, hey, I wanted to cover it. And I'm just basically paying them to cover it for me. Because don't forget, the publishers aren't covering. I'm paying them to cover these videos because I want to see these games as well, just like you. Anyway, though. Oh, and then there's one other thing I do as well. I don't know if you know, but every Sunday, I do the weekly Rahdo recap show. And on that, I describe what new videos went on the channel over the preceding 7 days. And if it's a video from Kimberly or Ruel or Amy and Maggie or Shay, I will actually try to describe why I am excited about that game, if it's at all appropriate. And I think, and maybe I need to redouble my efforts there too. I will try to do so, but I think I'm pretty clear. I mean, I often make a joke. If you go back and watch my recaps, I'll say something like, I am so jealous. This is definitely something I wanted to cover when Shay covers Evacuation or Kutna Hora. Or, this started a couple of years ago when he did the run-through for Carnegie that I wanted to do, but I wasn't able to do it, so he stepped in and he did it. Hope he didn't miss out on the great Carnegie run-through because it's phenomenal. It was in my top 10 of the year, but I didn't do the run-through of it. So I will take on board what you're saying and redouble my efforts to make sure that that is clear. But you've got 2 opportunities. Anybody can subscribe to my Patreon feed. It doesn't cost a cent, so you'll hear my thoughts about the stuff there. And then also, there's the weekly Rahdo recap show. Alrighty, next up, we have George, who says, recently, I think after listening to an episode of your podcast, a question came up that I could not let go. For you, what does it mean that a game is a killer of a specific other game? For example, in recent Final Thoughts, you implied that Wondrous Creatures is an Everdell killer. You didn't use the exact phrase, if I recall correctly, though. From other sources, I've often heard of the Dominion killers, Lost Ruins of Arnak killers, etc. The term seems to be applied to games that share a certain set of features. In your opinion, how similar do the 2 games need to be viable for killing each other, quote, end quote? Does the killing game have to be objectively better? Or is there always an implied, for me, because of what I see as defining features of these 2 games? Disregarding the fact that we, of course, are free to disagree, but is this a verdict meant to be objectively true? For me, the idea of a insert game title here, killer, goes against the grain. Not just because of the murderous metaphor and me feeling sorry for poor games being so violently disposed of. I also often return to games that have been temporarily replaced by others, Terraforming Mars and Ark Nova, for example, but I do still enjoy them and cherish their differences. Thus, if I cannot help but feel that I'm not always such a clear case of a game being better, just being different or new. Thus, I cannot help but feel that it's not always such a clear case of a game being better, but just not being different or new. Could Everdell have been a Wondrous Creature killer had they been released in a different order? Will it be a Wondrous Creature killer for somebody in the future? Somebody with a slightly different taste, perhaps. Good question, George. It's interesting. You're right. I am hesitant to say this game killed this game. And it's actually because many years ago, an excellent YouTube reviewer, Joel Eddy of Drive Thru Review, he used to, for every video he put up when he covered a game, he would say, name of game X, name of game Y killer. And it was just kind of like a standard thing he did. So you would, at a glance, just looking at the title, understand, oh, okay, now I don't know if this game really does kill this other game, but by drawing that comparison between the 2 in the title of the video, I instantly know a little bit more about that game, and I can make an informed decision about whether I should watch that video. And let's be honest, it's great clickbait. Oh, game X kills a game Y? I gotta find out why. I don't know if that was what Joel was doing, or he just thought it was funny sounding. But he eventually came out and said, you know what, I'm not going to do that anymore because I am uncomfortable with the metaphor, just like you, George. Personally, I don't have a problem with the metaphor because I don't know. I made a lot of hyper-violent video games in my day where we did a lot of killing. So I'm not particularly bothered by the phrase. But I do appreciate that some people are sensitive about it, and it can be misleading, and it is ultimately a very, very clickbaity thing, and I try not to do that too much. Much to my own regret, because of course the more clickbaity you do, the better you'll serve, the better the algorithm will treat you on YouTube. But regardless, I wonder if I'm going to call this Q&A something about Q&A killer or something like that. Regardless, you have a very excellent example, because here's the deal. As far as I'm concerned, Wondrous Creatures is an Everdell killer. No two ways about it. Now, when I say that, I'm comparing base Everdell against base Wondrous Creatures. Because, of course, Everdell has been around long enough to get, 4 or 5 different expansions. So maybe Wondrous Creature doesn't kill the broad scope of everything Everdell is. But how do I define what a killer is? It basically comes down to, hey, does the existence of this game on my shelf mean I no longer have a reason to have this other game on my shelf? If so, this game killed that game because I'm going to get rid of that game. And here's the deal. If I owned Everdell, which I don't, but I do own, what is it? Farshore. I do own Everdell Farshore. And when I played Farshore, I was like, wow, this is so much better than base Everdell. Maybe it's not as good as Everdell with all the stuff, but I really love the changes they made. Finally, I've got an Everdell because the original Everdell, I did not keep on my shelves. I thought it was a great game, but not good enough to keep. Farshore, I thought, wow, the sequel to Everdell, this is fantastic. This is worth keeping. But here's the deal. If I can get my hands on a final, retail copy of Wondrous Creatures, I am going to get rid of my copy of Farshore because I can't imagine a circumstance under which I would play Farshore or Everdell when I could play Wondrous Creatures. And why? Why do I draw the comparison? Hey, it's going to vary from situation to situation. Sometimes it's because, strictly speaking, the most obvious time is going to be when, hey, the two games have very, very similar settings and at the same time, very, very similar gameplay. And one, I find the gameplay to be significantly superior to the others. Now, all three of those things are true for Wondrous Creatures and Everdell. They're both beautiful, wonderful, charming, cartoony games about card tableau building and doing worker placement to get cards into play that'll combo against each other. That description I just is equally applicable to both games. And maybe that's the easiest way to say, when does one game kill another? When you could literally say the exact same description for both the games and people wouldn't know whether you're talking about game X or game Y. And then if one game is significantly superior in terms of fun factor, for me, you did bring this up and it's certainly valid that, hey, some people might find Wondrous Creatures not to be as much fun as Everdell, and more power to them. It's certainly important to bear in mind. It's easy to forget. And it's something I'm always try to be very careful to do, is never couch my opinions as fact. I always try to throw in the, well, I think and I feel and for me, those provisos, those caveats, because if I don't throw those in, it sounds like I am saying definitively this game kills this other game, when in fact, no, for me and my tastes it does, but it might not for you. And it always bugs me, other channels that don't do this, that express their personal opinions, strongly held opinions, as fact. In fact, that really gets under my craw. I'm not going to name names here, but a lot of channels do it. And maybe I do it sometimes too, but I try really hard not to. Because I think that's actively misleading and is literally poor form. So, right. There's always the undercurrent. And I think when anybody says game X kills game Y, if you were to corner them at a convention and say, you said this, and I said, well, of course it goes without saying, I'm just talking about from my own personal opinion, and then somebody could reply, but you stated it as fact. You didn't make the proviso that it's just for your personal taste or playing with your family or whatever. You said it like it was a fact. And you have to bear in mind, George, all board game reviewers, or a lot of board game reviewers, state things, and it sounds like they're making factual statements. And if you were to corner them, they would say, oh no, I didn't mean that as a fact. It was just implied that I'm just talking about for my own personal preference or my own personal subjective opinion. I try as much as possible to make clear that. And I know it drives some people nuts, but regardless. Anyway, to your original question of when does a game kill another, the most obvious thing is, in Wondrous Creatures, at the end of the day, I would say in Wondrous Creatures and Everdell, both have comparably good card effects. That, hey, I want to get this card into play because I need the resources so that I can get this other one because these two will combo well together, etc., etc. I think both games do that equally or almost equally well. Base Everdell does have the problem of, you need this specific card, otherwise you can't trigger this chain of stuff, and maybe you'll never see this card. Wondrous Creatures doesn't have that problem. Wondrous Creatures, like Farshore, ensures that they go a bit broader. That's why Farshore kills Everdell for me, and Wondrous Creatures kills Everdell and Farshore for me. So, Wondrous Creatures, like Farshore before it, does a better job of, the card combo stuff. But what's more important is, Everdell and Wondrous Creatures and Farshore, at the heart, they're all worker placement games. Very simple worker placement games. Well, that's not true. Everdell is a very simple worker placement game, and Farshore is a very simple worker placement game. Wondrous Creatures has all the cool card stuff of Everdell, all the wonderful presentation of Everdell, but then its worker placement is truly innovative, next level stuff, because each worker takes up 2 adjacent spaces on the worker placement spot, and depending on where you put it, you can activate multiple things, and you can activate multiple things in different ways. So it's multi-use, multiple activation vector worker placement. Nobody's ever done anything like it, and it is so far above and beyond the fairly standard, straightforward worker placement that Everdell does. Now, to be fair, I have not played a lot of the Everdell expansion, so maybe Everdell expansion is throwing a bunch of cool stuff, which again is why I caveated the whole thing by saying, well, Wondrous Creatures is a base game Everdell killer. But you know what? If Wondrous Creatures is a better game right from the get-go for roughly the same amount of money, hey, I could buy Everdell and then a whole bunch of other stuff, hundreds of dollars of other stuff, so that maybe it becomes better than Wondrous Creatures, or I can get Wondrous Creatures, which is, again, for my personal taste and my predilection and what I'm looking for, is better than Everdell. So, I mean, that's kind of how it comes down to me, and hopefully that makes sense. I feel like I'm kind of all over the place, but it was a good question. Right, okay. Then we've got Jerry, who says, I've come across a concept used during the course of some game's gameplay. I want to get your opinion. It's the concept of using known information to help make the game easier. Here's a few examples. 1. Tiny Epic Dungeons. In a 3-player game, the minions that you need to whack are all located between cards 8 and 16. This could lead you to build out your dungeon in a streamlined way, upping your chances of clearing the dungeon quickly. Maquis. Example 2. The game encourages you to look through the discard pile to help you calculate what's left in your draw pile. There are others I've come across, but these 2 should make my overall point. I feel that leveraging these types of known information cheapens the overall experience. I know that you could just ignore the information, but once you know it's available and possible, you'll always know. So, what's your opinion on this type of information leveraging? Am I being too critical, overthinking here? Or maybe these types of games just aren't for me. Think you nailed it there at the end, because here's the deal. You just sold me on Maquis and Tiny Epic Dungeons. You have just now made me excited to play those games, because for my taste and what I find enjoyable, I love that. I love the idea of being able to game the system when the system has been designed to be gamed. And for me, I'm going to give a third example, because there is no better example in all of board gaming. And I know I lean on this example a lot, and I apologize for long-time listeners. You know what I'm about to mention. Pandemic. The game that brought me in, because here's the way Pandemic does it. You have a deck of cities around the world. You have 1 card for each city on the board. And over the course of the game, you will draw these cards, and viruses will break out in all these cities. And eventually, there will be an event that says, hey, take the discard pile, shuffle it up, and put it back on top of the draw deck. And to me, that's the secret sauce that makes Pandemic just about the most perfect board game in board game history. Because now I've got secret knowledge. I've got insider trading level knowledge, because I know that in that deck, Chicago is going to hit. Now, I just put 9 cards on the deck. I don't know when Chicago is going to get hit, but I know Chicago is about to be hit. Simply because these mechanisms, wow, I think I just saw a big bird, might have been a pelican, just dive bomb. Whoa, sorry folks. We're here at the Black Beach, south of San Felipe in Mexico right now, and you wouldn't believe the beautiful view I've got right outside the window. But the sun is starting to go down. I really need to get this gun. Anyway, sorry, that was very distracting. But, oh man. Anyway, okay, they're flying away. Probably got their fish. Sorry. What was I just saying? Talk about distracting. Right. Oh, Pandemic. So I love that because, if the game is designed for it, then you should be leveraging these things. It doesn't cheapen the game. The game was designed assuming you would do it. The developers of Maquis and Tiny Epic Dungeons put those in specifically so that you could notice these things, take this information on board, almost like insider trading, if you were to think of it that way, and then leverage that information to succeed at greater heights.
to me, it doesn't cheapen the game at all because the designers want you to do that. And you will perform poorly if you don't do that. To me, that makes the game more fun because the game is a richer, more puzzly experience. If I can leverage this knowledge and I can get ahead of it so I can use that to my advantage, it makes me feel smart. It makes me feel accomplished. It feels like I've learned a secret and now I can use that secret to my benefit. These are all positive, wonderful things. And hey, different strokes for different folks. If it doesn't work for you, then you're right. The game just isn't for you. But it's really a shame because you feel like, I understand where you're coming from. You kind of feel like you're cheating. Like you shouldn't know this. You should be, this should be unexpected surprise stuff. But all I can tell you is, if the designer were there playing the game with you, they'd say, dude, I worked really hard to balance the game so that you could use this information to your benefit. And that's the key to playing this game well. So go back and try Maquis or some other game with this in mind, that this is the way you're supposed to play. You're literally breaking the rules if you don't do it. And maybe that'll make it more attractive. And if it doesn't, hey, you know what? Not every game is for everybody, and that's okay. Okay, let's see, moving on.
And that will be the end of this session of the Rahdo Q&A. Thank you, folks, for watching and also for submitting your questions. Send me more to the email address questions@rahdo.com, and I'll get you covered in a future episode. And in the meantime, if you would like to hear some more, you're in luck. I have been doing the Rahdo Talks Through audio podcast for years now with my wife, Jen, and we have got hundreds of hours for you to enjoy. You can hit that big box that's on screen right now if you want to dive deep. Also, you can go on ahead and subscribe so you won't miss the next Rahdo Q&A. And thank you, folks, for watching, for listening. Have a very, very nice day. Talk to you later. So long. Bye-bye.